Hey, party people, what's up? And welcome to Cloud Conversations. My name is Azure McFarlane. I'm one of the hosts, and I'm here joined by my friend Kat. And I'm going to yeet the mic to Kat so she can introduce our guest today.
You can tell
Kat.
it's Friday already. We just had a bit of a kerfuffle. Like, what are we gonna do? We all need a bit more. Well, I need a bit more coffee anyway. But yes, thanks. I'm amazing.
Have decaf today, so
come prepared. So yeah, I'm doing really, really well, and I have the absolute honor and pleasure to introduce Nikki Chapple to the show. Nikki, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here today.
No problem at all. We're just saying another all-female episode. You can't go wrong. So it is all good. So let's start. Nikki, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience? What you do, what's your role, how you spend your time, what you specialize in, all of that great stuff.
Okay. Yeah, so my name's Nikki Chapple. I'm in the UK near London. I'm a principal cloud architect working for a company called Cloudway. It's a very small company. It's a Norwegian company, and there's only 10 people in the company, and it's an absolute pleasure to be working with 9 other MVPs. So it's kind of great team working, cover
cool.
Everything Microsoft 365, and I specialize in Microsoft 365 governance and compliance, and really balancing that need between those rules, the security and the compliance rules, yet the productivity. We don't want to lock it all down, sort of thing. It's getting that balance right. So for that secure collaborative working. I've been with them only a few months now, but yeah, it's really great. Love it that I can work from home, no more traveling into London every day on a kind of hour and a half journey each day. So for me, that's kind of a real added bonus there. So what else? I'm an MVP. So recently MVP, and I'm actually an MVP twin with Kat. We both found out the same day that we were MVP. So it's kind of, it's a real kind of the icing on the cake, I think, for me to be able to say that I'm an MVP now. And it's really, really good. Love working with Microsoft.
Yeah, I think it's so cool working, because I know that Leslie, who we've had on the show before, also works at Cloudway and recently joined quite relatively recently as well. And imagine spending your time working with another, all your colleagues are MVPs and know about the community work, and you're sharing tips and you do them together. And I just think, I bet that's so much fun to work with a whole bunch of other people who have the same passion that you do.
Yeah. And what's really good is we have this culture, no meetings Friday, where we're actually really encouraged to spend some time and reflect what we've done, work with our clients. Is there things then we can share with the wider community? Can we create blogs and articles about what we're doing? Can we help share, present information, put forward for papers at events, etc. So you'll find that we're always speaking at events. So I think Commsverse is coming up soon, and 3 out of from Cloudway are all presenting at that event. So it's really good.
I think I did see that on your Twitter. That's the end of June, correct?
I think so, yes. Yeah, it's actually it's an in-person event. Yeah, so it'd be really nice to actually go and see people.
Nikki, I'll be presenting as well, so I'll see you there.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll put the link to your Twitter and whatnot in the show notes so people can connect with you. But I saw that tweet and I was like, ooh, okay. At the end of June, you'll be speaking on some stuff. So shameless plug. That's totally okay to do here for sure.
Definitely. And just going back then from your career before Cloudway, can you tell us a little bit about how you started in tech, when you started, what roles you've been involved in?
I've had a kind of, I suppose, a long journey into technology. I mean, I suppose it started at school, going back before the days of GCSEs, when we had sort of O levels that you did between 14 and 16. I think I was the first year that we did the computing one. And it was mainly boys in the class. I think it was about 2 or 3 girls. But that was really interesting, kind of getting used to kind of, this is how you can do technology to just do some interesting things. We were using things like, the little Sinclair computers, the ZX81, and we were having to do things like punched cards, so write in BASIC, and you filled out this form, and each of the squares, I think there's like 40 in total, you wrote out each line for your basic program. So I mean, they were quite small then, so it might be 20 lines, and then that was sent off to the local university, where somebody punched the cards up, run it through the computer, and then hopefully by next week you'd get all your results back. And then normally it'd be something like syntax error, and you think, oh, I have to wait another whole week now to adapt to this and send it back. So yeah, I mean, it's a completely different way of working now. I mean, I was lucky. We did have computers at home as well. I had a father who was a university lecturer, so I had kind of dabbled a little bit. And then I was just lucky. I got a job working in BT in computer operations, just starting at the bottom of the career, working with mainframes. And I kind of spent 16 years there, working in a lot of different roles, a lot of different opportunities there, and really seeing how computer changed over that time, starting off in a world where it was computer mainframes, and we were still punching cards and kind of big open reel disks, and kind of no Windows really. We were on DOS computers, floppy disks, and a lot of them were just green screens. And then seen that whole world change from one role I had was managing computer centers. So that these are huge, great big computer centers, and the rooms were almost like sizes of football pitches. And I used to have to like manage all the different computers there, working with the different engineers on putting in either mainframe computers or disks, etc., and working out the air conditioning and cabling, etc. And these rooms were so big, I put letters down one side of the wall, A to Z, and then I had numbers across the other side. So if somebody came in to change a disk, they said, oh, it's disk number this. I'd have to give them grid directions. This is in this bank of disks. And they'd find it, because what would happen is they'd open up the wrong box, take out one of the disks, and these are like not hot swappable disks, it failed or something, and it'd be the wrong disk on the wrong computer system, and then crash something else. Yeah, it was kind of really different. And then the world changed, and it all started going down into server technology. So it was all a case of then closing down a lot of these computer centers because you didn't need as much space anymore. And also then Windows came along. There's much more power then to the end users. So it was a real change in the mindset. So I'm changed out of IT, and I went into a marketing role, which is kind of marketing and operations. But it was really at that time with BT, where there was a lot of other operators around, and they wanted programs to help support their call centers. So that's what I developed. I was developing using end user tools, things like Excel lookup sheets, scripts using words and everything for the contact center stuff. So it was completely different, using the tools that they had to hand on their desktops, and how can you maximize the use of that. And I think that's kind of stayed with me throughout my career. It's that translator role between, you've got a whole load of tech that people don't really care about unless you're in IT, and people that have just not got enough time, and all they want to do is have things that are simpler, more efficient, more effective. So I think that's where I come in, of kind of being that translator. How can you maximize those tools? So I think, all throughout my career. And then I think finally really getting into Microsoft 365, one of my previous companies, I was actually responsible for actually implementing Office 365 at the organization. So it was a traditional organization, so much, everything on premise, everything took so long and so hard to deploy. When suddenly you've got this really agile tool, and you're pushing it out, you're empowering people to do so much. And I thought, wow, this is just so fascinating. People are not using it. They buy these licenses and they just use, let's just use email. They don't use all of the other really interesting functionality. So I thought, gosh, I could spend my whole life trying to learn about it. And that's where I've been since.
Amazing. I think going from the technical side, or the working behind the scenes in IT, and then having that marketing operations and the other side of it, I bet that's helped you so much in your current and recent roles, I guess, when working with customers. Would that be fair to say.
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, we're using technology to solve business problems.
Yeah.
We're there to remove blockers, particularly the governance and compliance stuff. We need to make sure that things are kind of safe and secure. But at the end of the day, we're solving problems for business. Technology is just an enabler. So, we've got to win those hearts and the minds of the users. Otherwise, it's so easy for them to go elsewhere. Everyone's got a phone nowadays. You can just kind of download any consumer app, and then the companies are wondering, oh, why is everybody using WhatsApp?
Yeah.
Because it's easy.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is we need to make, business, corporate work within Microsoft 365 easy, yet ensure that it's kind of safe and secure.
Yeah. I was in a meeting recently with like some other people just discussing about like Microsoft documentation and whatnot, and sometimes how it's easy for us to understand per se, and sometimes maybe it's not even that because it's written from the perspective, I guess, people that are working with it, but not being able to translate that language to customers, that's a huge gap sometimes. I mean, not sometimes, I would say all the time, because we want to make sure that they understand what they're doing too. And like you said, being able to use the full suite or make their processes more robust. But if you don't have that interpreter in the middle, how are they supposed to know? Because they're buying a product, but we have to help them understand exactly what it does. And sometimes I think that I've read some documentation that it's not really clear like what the item itself does. It tells you how to use it, but not actually what its function is. So.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. People need to know the why. Why am I doing this? What am I doing it? And what's in it for me? I think too often, IT switch things on and then, tick, that project's finished. I'm off to do something else. And they forget that, to unlearn something and relearn something can take 6 months to do. So that's where kind of that whole kind of that change management piece comes in. And people are expected to feel uncomfortable with change. It's natural to feel uncomfortable. Everyone's comfortable in their own happy existence, what they're familiar with, what it's easy. To get someone to do something else, you've got to work with people. So the earlier you get the business on board on any project, the better, because you can uncover those areas where people are unhappy about it. You can understand, you can learn what their concerns are, and then you've got times to address them. And then sometimes by getting those people on early on the project, those as business champions, those skeptical people can then be your business best advocates going forward, really, because they've been through that pain, so they can then help other people go through that pain.
Yeah, definitely.
That's
and I know that
great.
you are ProSci certified as well. So I guess from what you've said, how important is change management when you talk to a customer about governance and compliance, putting that in place? Do you put change management up there as they're both just as important as each other? Should you start one before the other, or how does that work when you talk to customers?
Yeah, kind of a lot of the time I don't explicitly talk about change management as a process, because a lot of people, IT people roll their eyes. They just think, it just happens, it just kind of, people just pick it up. So when I'm talking to people, it's really important to get the right stakeholders in the room, to get the business stakeholders in there, to understand all of the different elements that you need to do. And, it starts off with the business defining their wants and needs. Then you look at how technology can implement that, and then you look at how are you going to adopt it. So you've kind of built in that change management process right the way through the process. But I think it's also important that IT need to go through change management now. With IT, people have gone from a world where the network was their boundary. Everything was on premise on their servers, and the network was their control and their kind of security defense. Well, with the SaaS applications and now with hybrid working, your applications in the cloud, you can access it from any device, from anywhere. It's a different way of working. And again, trying to explain some of the aspects of those kind of governance features when people are still kind of thinking of, everything must be behind our network to make it, compliant. So it's working with them as well to actually say, this is the art of the possible.
Yeah.
And these are the changes. And it's a cultural mind shift for them as well as a cultural mind shift for the business. So, you have to look at it at the different levels, really.
Definitely. And what if there was a customer, because I know you share a lot of tips and tricks and really, really useful information on your blog, which again, we'll put in the show notes so people can go in and have a look at that. But there's really, really useful blogs in there about governance compliance, but what to do if, you're in the situation of a Teams sprawl. I think that's for most customers that I speak to, they've either gone through that process of been in a sprawl. It's not very often where I've spoken to a customer where they've introduced Teams, people started using it and it's all great and they've put in a process and, they've got a nice balance and there's not an overload of teams that are unused and groups and duplication. And, that doesn't happen very often when that's not the case. So how would you suggest a customer, what's the best place to start? I'm a customer in a team sprawl, got a huge amount of information. What's my first step to fix that problem?
Can I ask, first of all, can you explain team sprawl?
Yeah,
good one.
Yeah. So what is kind of team sprawl? It's kind of my analogy of it. It's a bit like when you've got children, and my kids are grown up now, but when they were little, they loved playing with Lego. So you say Lego time, brilliant, big box of Lego, tip it out. Within 5 minutes, it's all over the house. You're treading on it and everything. And people are having a great time and they're using it. But then when it's tea time, you've got to tidy up. Those kids will disappear and find that they've got homework or something far more important to do. So it's just left. And then imagine that kind of building up over time. You just kind of get more and more clutter on it. And that's really what happens with the teams. It's so easy without any governance at all. People go into that bottom left-hand corner of teams, create a team. I'll create a team for this. I'll create a team for that. So the first one is if you don't have a rule book, people just create teams for a conversation, a one-off activity. But people never think about actually deleting a team. So, it's easy to create, it's easy to use, but then you've created a team for a project and the project finishes. And then nobody knows exactly what to do with it. And, people forget that teams should be really used for transient type of information and not for long-term storage of content. And because they've got content in there and some of it might need to be kept longer term, the team remains. So what happens over time is you get more and more teams building out, and that causes real frustration to end users because you've got a menu of your teams and your newest created teams always goes to the bottom of the list. You have to kind of manually move them around. You can't kind of auto change them. So people don't know how to leave teams. They don't know how to hide teams. So then it all gets more and more confusing in this kind of world. You're kind of wading through this list to try and find out which is the right team. Then you've got that issue of people inadvertently posting the wrong information to the wrong team. And then you kind of got that data overexposure, issue as well. So kind of we need a process of tidying it up. And that's really, really hard because people don't know exactly what to do. So it's all part of this kind of governance journey is, when do you create a team? So if you can get the rules right to start off with, you create less teams. Then you've got to have a defined purpose, a defined end for that team. If it's an operational team, well, that team stays there as long as the marketing or the HR or the IT department. Actually, a lot of the teams are there for a project or an activity-based task. There needs to be a clear goal that when that activity finished, something should happen to that team. And that's where the process is immature within Microsoft, and you really need to start looking at kind of third-party products to manage that. So I spend a lot of time with organizations thinking about that whole kind of data lifecycle. What are you going to do with data? How can you tidy it up?
Yeah, I'm thinking about examples from previous companies that I've worked with that did implement teams. There was, and I was helping some of the, at least the teams trainings to get people familiar with it. I wasn't in IT. It was just, we had teams, people didn't know how to use it. We had some leadership that was like, okay, we're going to create, teams for, every department. Cause I was like, okay, that seems like a good idea. But then they wanted to add everybody from the entire company from the site in each department team. And I was like, ooh, that doesn't sound great. And it was a big mess. And then somebody who hadn't been attending trainings went to a couple of teams that they didn't think that they needed and started deleting channels, thinking it was hiding the channels instead. So what you're saying is completely and utterly accurate, that you do need to have some sort of guidances to tell people what to do and what not to do. I remember an email being sent out and they're like, hey, our channel is missing. Can you help us? And I was like, I mean, I don't work in IT, so probably not. But then you could go and see in the channel, it says so-and-so has deleted the channel. And we had a good laugh about that. But it really could have been critical information, right? That was deleted and couldn't be restored.
Yeah, and it's, you can only recover it for 30 days. So if somebody doesn't notice until day 31,
right.
Sorry, it's gone. And for me, a really good analogy thinking about that is like when you learn to drive, you don't just get into a car. You're not given the keys and say, off you go. For me, that's like creating a kind of a team. You're just given the car keys and off you go. You've got to learn that theory book. You've got to pass that theory test. So that's the equivalent of kind of having that training and different training for the different roles. Are you just a member of the team or are you the owner? If you're the owner of the team, you're accountable for the life cycle of that team, who's in the teams, what you're doing with the data, and importantly, moving those important artifacts out of the team before it's kind of closed down. And I think a lot of it, people had to rush to implement teams with the pandemic.
Yes.
So I think, they just had to use it. So now I think 2 years later, you've got this situation with so many teams. The other issue you've got is you can create teams with the same name. There's nothing to stop you doing that, either from an end user or the admin centers. It'll quite happily let you create teams, finance, and then somebody else comes along and creates a term, finance. Yeah. And the kind of a true story I had is a UK university, and they had a team called finance for the finance team that dealt with the finances for the university. Some students were on a finance course and they created a team called finance for the students working on their finance degree. Somebody was working on pay for some university lecturers, wanted to put it into the right team, obviously had a look around and do a search. And if the teams are public, you can see them, found this team, posted the information. Of course, it was on the wrong team.
Whoops.
Oh my goodness.
So it's having, I think, that rule book, to stop the chaos, really. It's kind of, you think of most things in life, we have some sort of rule book. If we're doing cooking, we follow the cookery book and the instructions. We don't just randomly throw things out of our fridge into the frying pan and hope it works.
Definitely. I think there's a good balance as well when you said we don't want people to, we don't want to shadow IT. If people can't go in and create a team, they'll go and create a WhatsApp group and you can't manage it. Yeah. So I know that you do a lot of speaking slots and there's blogs that you've written as well, which are amazing, talking about creating a bit of a team request process that is automated with Power Automate. So people have that autonomy to go in and request for a team to be created. They can say why they need the team. They can maybe use a template and, it's a project team or whatever it may be. And that can go through an approval process. And that team then, if it's approved, can automatically be created. Yeah. So there's all of these tools in most Office 365 licenses that can just help give users a bit of a way to create their own space, but at the same time not, allow them to, or even things like naming conventions, maybe block some payroll and HR names from being created in there as well. There was something I did want to ask actually, since it was announced like the other day. What do you think about the new names for Microsoft compliance? Microsoft Purview. Woo.
Yeah, I was just talking about this just earlier on. And I said, you'll have to go back and change all your information. And are you going to talk about it? But no, actually, from an end user viewpoint, if you started talking about Purview, what does the word Purview mean? It's kind of this. So I think we're going to be still talking about compliance because that's a word that business people use. So I think kind of the Purview is obviously the suite of the applications that help you implement the stuff. I suppose it's broaden it out, isn't it? It's trying to, with a lot of these products, it's wider than Microsoft 365 now, isn't it? The controls and applications, you're extending into the world of Azure, you're extending into the world of kind of other data cloud sources as well. So I suppose trying to make it, obviously it's a Microsoft product, but more product agnostic because it scopes wider.
I think that's a really good
definitely.
point. Yeah, the product agnostic. Oh, sorry. I think
That's
that
okay.
it's great
There's
to
a
make
big
it clear.
delay, I think.
That's okay. It's like a live demo, right? Like things happen and don't quite work out. I was gonna say, I as I've been seeing like screenshots of, because I know Pete, he put out the screenshot of the name convention change. And as someone who I work in Power Platform, so cloud technology too, it is helpful to see that this also applies maybe to me. Because when I see things like M365, any dynamics, I always think it's a siloed, and maybe our products aren't as siloed anymore and they're encompassing more. So I don't really know a lot about security and compliance. Like I talk to clients about like, you need to have that. This is something newer for me. But I like the idea of, somebody's not going to get confused because it says M365 when they're dealing with, Azure instead. So from a person who's like newer into tech, I would say that helps me a little bit. So I like the idea. I don't know if that's the general consensus though.
Yeah, I think it's good that they're putting a lot of emphasis on it. And I think, it's important that people understand what those compliance tools are. I think it's still confusing for the end users because you've got all of this wonderful stuff, but actually a lot of it, you do need those kind of E5 licenses, and only a very small percentage of organizations, probably less than 10% of all organizations invest in those E5 licenses. So it's kind of making it scalable, really. And I think that's where we can help translate the technical Microsoft documentation into, if you're in the business premium licenses, which are the largest number of organizations, the smaller organizations, you can get this far with it. If you invest and you've got these other ones, the add-on. So it's trying to, again, it's that translator role. Is you've got all of these features and functionalities, whatever the names are that Microsoft have, and then translate them into what does it mean for me as a business.
Yeah, definitely. I think that I can see why they've done it. I've seen people absolutely just saying it's a nightmare, and some people saying it makes sense. I think it makes sense, like they did with the Defender suite. Customers get confused. It's easier to say, let's talk about Microsoft Purview, let's talk about, and it means one thing rather than the different features and information protection, and it just was confusing. It was talking to customers about it. So yeah, I'm for change. So we'll see how that develops. I did want to ask and talk about, because you mentioned MVP, woo! So I did want to talk about your MVP journey. First of all, congratulations. Amazing to be MVP, and very well deserved, 100%. I know we became MVP at very similar times, so it'd be interesting to know what your journey's been like so far, since becoming MVP. Has things changed a lot, not a lot? Be good to know.
I don't think things have changed that much yet. So I think the good thing, once you're an MVP, you're close to Microsoft. So sometimes the things that you're doing, it's getting an idea of what's coming on the roadmap and how things work. And if you've got a question, you can kind of post it there, and they've got experts and people to help you. And I think it's just good to be able to work with other like-minded people that are really passionate about it. And, I'm always a believer of kind of working collaboratively with people for the greater good sort of thing. So, so I'm starting a podcast shortly on sort of compliance. I'm going to be with Kat, and we're going to be writing a book with some other people as well for our sins, on compliance. We're going to have to change the name of the book. I was just thinking about that. I was going to put a post up because we were talking about what's the title, what's going to be the content, what's the scope, and then of course the name's changed. So I was thinking, thank God we hadn't written half of it. We're to the beginning of our journey.
We had some guests on maybe earlier this year who were talking about writing books for taking like one of the security certification courses, and something similar happened where there are some name changes and or content changes for the exam, and then it was like, oh, well, we wrote the book, I guess we're just gonna have to go through and, you know, find and replace everything, or redo a chapter or eliminate a chapter, just decide we're going to put it in a different version of the book. So.
Yeah, and I think kind of the books is almost the wrong kind of word for it, because you expect a book to be something printed and something that's going to have longevity in it. But yeah, with Microsoft 365, it's changing. IT is changing so fast that you can't have these things in printed form, because they just get dated so quickly. So it needs to be something that's in a modular fashion, something that is just online that you can quickly go through and adapt and change and build as needed. So it's kind of a different process. So it's a subscription model rather than a one-off book purchase.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good
exciting.
Woo. What about the podcast, the compliance podcast you mentioned? What is that? When is it available? Where?
Well, we haven't started it yet, so it's going to be all about sort of compliance, and we're going to try and target it more for the end user rather than the IT people. How can I use the tools within Microsoft to help support my compliance journey, and the different tools that we've got? And the idea is to look at different areas on each podcast, looking at some sort of user stories that we have on that, to actually say, how can we tackle that problem, you know, and how can we solve that? So I'm actually doing the podcast with Ryan Murphy. So he actually works for a company called Epic, and they work for kind of really large corporate, like banking, really regulated industries, whereas I'm coming from it on a different thing, working with organizations, small, medium and large, but probably less regulated. So we'll be able to kind of get those case studies from your small company where you've got a very small IT department, right through to, you know, global organizations, corporate organizations, and how we can work that. And so that we haven't actually recorded the first episode yet, so that should be very soon.
Amazing. I like that. I like that you've done the other end of it. Not many people, when it comes to compliance, look at it from the end user perspective. It's all about how do we implement this stuff and where do we start, than how are our users actually going to consume this technology. That's a very important part that we're relying on. How are they going to use it?
Yeah. And then I think that kind of the danger is that when we work kind of so close with all the technology, a lot of the information is written by IT people for IT people. So we're kind of learning from each other, but we all have kind of quite a good base to work on. It's how do we get outside of our kind of our LinkedIn and our Twitter bases, which tend to be, you know, more people within the industry. How do we get out there to the wider audience and really help the people and say, well, this is how you can use technology. Get people to understand that they don't necessarily need to go out and buy other products to do stuff, and kind of look within the existing product sets that they have.
Definitely. I think that's really exciting. What's the podcast going to be called? Or is there a name yet?
I'm not sure.
You'll probably do the first episode and it will come to you. Do you know when you like write something, a blog, and then you're like, okay, they'll be called this.
Yeah, so I can't remember whether we sorted out a name or not. So I'm just the co-host on it. So it should be good.
We'll keep an eye out. Yeah, we'll keep an eye out.
Yeah, so hopefully it'll be out soon in next month, because we're nearly at the end of April now. So
amazing. And you've got lots of speaking slots as well in terms of like your community, everything that you're doing there. Lots and lots of speaking slots. I see you pop up everywhere. And you're doing a couple in person. Commsverse we mentioned. Is there any other ones you're doing in person? Are you going to Scottish Summit or any other ones?
No, I'm not doing Scottish Summit, so I'm away then. Hopefully I'll go to South Coast Summit. So I'm volunteering there, so I know I'll be there in person. They haven't done the call for speakers yet, so I went there last year. So it's nice to go to some in-person events and kind of socialize, because I find that there's pros and cons really with both. I find that the online events, I say, oh, look at this load of great speakers and all of these different sessions, and I book it in my calendar, and then a work meeting comes in.
Yes.
And then you end up not actually spending time. You go to the session for your slot and you speak about what you're doing and do the question and answers, but then quite often you're dragged away for other things. So I found the kind of best way to get around that is I've helped support moderate some of the conferences. So you're forced then, aren't you, to block your whole calendar out, and that's a definite day out of my calendar because I'm actually moderating the whole event.
Yeah.
So I think that's the downside. I mean, the positive side is you get to speak to a wider group of people, because you can go to an event, present an event in, Australia or America or India, etc. It's so much easier. But, the benefits of the, I think, in-person events is that you've got that opportunity to go and listen to all the events. You've taken the day out, so you're going to be there. You've got opportunity to speak and socialise with other people as well.
Yeah,
and I think that's important when I'm based at home. Otherwise, I don't speak to anyone in person.
I know, you're becoming we all become hermits in our rooms. Like,
yeah.
to go see somebody. I think we had that conversation with a customer actually, and I have not done an in-person workshop with a customer where I'm on site for the day or a couple of days in a long time, and like maybe even like a year. Like it's been a lot. We offer out to customers if they're comfortable. And everybody's in different locations, so it's not very often we go in person. They were kind of saying, let's do this one that we're going to do as a Viva one. Let's do it in person because they admitted, they're like, I'm a terrible one for zoning out and just doing other work when there's a Teams meeting going on. I'll turn off my camera and I'm just not there. I've joined, but I'm not an active listener. So to be taken out of, the distraction and just put in the place where you can sit, you can listen, you can, network and interact, you get a lot more from it than you would in a remote setting, I would say. Do you prefer like presenting in person or online in terms of you as a speaker? Do you have a preference?
Not particularly, no. I think you get better engagement because you can read the room. As you're saying, you're presenting at an event and you can see that there's 20 or 50 or 100 people online. And just as you said, Kat, are those people really there? You'll see people flipping in and out, or they're on their phones, or they're doing anything, and then sometimes you get that awful deadly silence at the end. Any questions, and there's nothing. Does that mean I bored them silly, or does it mean my presentation was good enough? I answered all the questions that I expected them to answer. You don't know, or are they not really there, they're doing something else. And I think that's where the role of the moderator comes in. It's really, really important. So I know when I moderate event, I always make sure that I'm actively listening and trying to think of all the questions that people might ask. And again, start that dialogue off, because then suddenly people then think, oh, yes, maybe I do have a question. Whereas it's much easier, I think, that kind of Q&A and interaction in an in-person event. Even if the person doesn't actually want to ask the question there, they can always come up after the event and you've spoken. And I find that happens quite a lot. People come up and said, oh, I like that session. I've got a particular question on X, Y, and Z. And then you can kind of follow up.
Now I'm getting really excited to be in person.
Are you going to any in-person ones, Azure, just out of interest? Is there any?
Yeah, I think when we had Pragati on, so I'm doing Dynamics Con live in Texas in the fall. So that'll be in September. So that'll be my first in-person conference. Everything else has been virtual, so it'll be a very, very different experience. I'm looking forward to it. And I've been doing in-person customer engagements over the past month and a half or so, which that is also just new to me in general, but I've found it very enjoyable to sit down and work through problems with people in the room and actually see them react to it, right? Because like you were saying, Nikki, that you're like, I can't quite tell through a screen, especially when there's no video either, how people are really feeling about the topic. And I found it feels much more approachable. I think that people are more willing to ask questions, voice their concerns more readily maybe than over, like a Teams call. At least I feel a bit more comfortable, I would say, in a room, because you can tell, like, do I need to assuage people's fears, or do I need to push them a little bit to, like, make a decision? But yeah, when there's just silence on the other end of the line, you're like, well, I don't really know what to do with that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's scarier doing it in person. So even a customer meeting in person, I get nervous so much. Like I've been doing this for 6 years, and I still get nervous doing workshops or any presentations or even like calls and stuff. But in person, I always think, oh my God, I'm going to be sick. Like, with the nerves so much. Whereas online, I feel like there's a little protection there. I get more of a buzz though in person, definitely, after you've done it and you're just like, oh my goodness, what a feeling is. Yeah, you can't beat it. So I think there's a balance of both, definitely. I did want to go off topic a little bit on outside of tech and outside of what we're doing in the community. What do you like to do in your spare time? Do you have hobbies or anything like that?
Yeah. I'm afraid one of my hobbies is Microsoft. So I'm one of these people. I'm a person that doesn't sleep very much. So I'm up until probably about 2:00 every night, maybe 3. And quite often I'll still be on my computer learning something. So I spend a lot of time, say, on computers. I don't really watch TV very much. I go to quizzes. So I used to go to like a pub quiz, and then the pandemic hit, so they all became online quizzes. So that we're still doing the online quizzes, and I do the pub quizzes as well. So that's quite a good thing. So the online ones, I've got my parents involved in it. They're in their 80s, so they're all up to speed with Teams now and know exactly what they're doing after 2 years. But yeah, it's quite good social, and I really enjoy music as well. So that for me was the biggest thing that I missed: the music, listening to good music, and dancing. That kind of, you get that real good vibes, and you kind of the adrenaline goings, and and it just makes you feel so good. So yeah, I've got some events coming up. This tells me how old I am. So I'm going to see the Scatterlights in like 2 weeks time. So that's like all the ska type of music. I'm going to see Nile Rodgers and Chic. So that's kind of the whole disco stuff. That'll be amazing. And I've got Hyde Park. I'm going to go and see Duran Duran. And I think Nile Rodgers is on that one as well. So they're my big ones. But also I like to go just to the local pub or something when they've got the bands on as well. And yeah, that's kind of how I let my hair down, I think.
Nikki, what kind of music do you like to dance to? What's your style? Do you have a style for dancing?
I don't know, anything that makes me feel good. So I mean, I was kind of, I suppose, an 80s girl at heart. That's when I was at school, so 70s, 80s. So I still like the disco type stuff. But I also like some of the dance stuff. So some of the trancey type music, like Tiesto and stuff like that. So that type of music I like. And anything that makes me feel good. So anything that's got a good beat. And,
we're gonna see Nikki at the rave
on that dance floor.
Yeah. You're like, okay, Nikki, we're gonna go to Coachella next year, or to like an EDM festival. Let's go. I'm ready.
I'd love to go to Ibiza. I'm still not been to some of the clubs there. That'd be really cool to do some of that.
Oh my goodness, amazing!
But
that's
too old to do all the tents and stuff like that in the UK. Yeah.
Oh, goodness me, that's so good. Yeah, I'm not. My mum, I guess, I'm sorry, I don't know if she's here. My mum listens to disco, and she's a big fan. She's a big fan of Duran Duran as well. So I've, listened. I'd say my preference is not as dancey. I'm more of a metal type of person. So I'm really happy that there's loads of gigs and things back on. So there's loads of metal gigs that we typically go to. Which I'm just so happy they're back. I think that's one thing because we didn't go to a gig, and we used to go to them quite frequently, and we just didn't. That experience of live music is just you can't beat it. And I think the last time I went, or the last gig we went to, was we went to Download Festival, which was the tents and the camping, but luckily our friends had a camper van, so we didn't have to do the tents, thank goodness. So I'm like you, Nikki, I don't think I'm a fan of that. But yeah, and that was, I think, in like 2018 or 19. It was quite a long time ago. So yeah, really excited to see the live music again.
I went to a concert 2 weeks ago-ish. So the Kennedy Center here, which is a performance hall in DC, had big Mingus band playing. So Charles Mingus, he was a jazz instrumentalist. He passed away like in the 70s, but his wife has kept this band going. And some of these gentlemen are now in their 90s who used to play with Mingus when he was younger. And I happened to score tickets like for a date. And we went all masked up and everything. And it turned out to be like the centennial anniversary of Mingus and everything. And they were like recording, and we got third row seats. And it was just, I hadn't felt like that in a long time. Like I play cello. The guy that I went with, he plays trombone. So there was just like this nice musical kind of connection going on, not only apart from just like, being there and enjoying the experience, but like seeing instrumentalists and whatnot and being so close. And jazz is a lot of fun to me. I'm a classical musician, but I still think jazz really has it together. Like the shows are just really fun, and they're yelling at each other, and there's poetry, like slam poetry in there too. And it was just it was a great time. It was a really great time. I've missed live music too.
And I think what I like to do, particularly like with the local bands, is to go and try out different music. You can go to a gig and you think, I didn't really like that. But you might find something that you do kind of think, that's really good. I want to follow up and do more of that. Whereas you probably wouldn't spend a lot of money going to a big event. And I think also with the big event, sometimes you're just so far away. You see these little dots and you think, is that person? And I'm only really tiny. So I'm only kind of 5 foot. So that's 152 centimeters. So, you've always got, everybody's taller than me anyway. So if you're at a live gig and you're standing up, you can't really see so much of the big venues. So yeah, the smaller ones I tend to find a better and more intimate. You get that vibe.
Yes, you do. I have a girlfriend who pre-pandemic, she just loves live music. And so there's a concert venue, like an outdoor concert venue, and the tickets would be like $30. And she just snagged a bunch of them and was like, do you want to go? If we found artists that we liked, or she would take somebody else. But I was like, that's not quite my cup of tea. But I always loved how she was just very adventurous in that respect. And so summers are just concerts. I'm ready for that to come back. I don't know if it's going to be back this summer, but it's like, okay, I'll go. Just something to do. And it's nearby, and you're outdoors, and just.
Yeah. I'm going to Norway soon for work. We're all meeting up in Norway, plus Cloudway are sponsoring an event there. So we're going to be working on the stands. But after that event, my husband's going to fly out, and we're going to spend the weekend in Oslo. And they've got this live music weekend there where it's all like free, and the bars, and they put music outside on stands and everything. I said, we've got to stay for the weekend for that. And just go around, have a few drinks, bite to eat, just listen to whatever different music they've got.
Sounds great.
Just be, just nice, chilled out.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. God, you're making me want to just go out to like a gig.
Let's go.
Hyde Park now. So ready for it in the hot weather as well. Oh my goodness.
Your homework is, Kat, to go find something that's happening within the next like month or two and book it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've got something in June, but yeah, I might not be able to wait that long, so we'll see. But amazing. Great. I think that's all we've got time for today on the show. But it's been absolutely amazing to speak to you, Nikki, catch up with you, Azure, as well. Before we close out, is there anything you want to leave the audience with, Nikki? Any last, I guess the last words, that's a bit ominous. But you got anything? I know. Goodness me. Is there anything, how can people get in touch with you and so on?
Okay. So I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. So on Twitter, I'm Chapple Nikki, not the other way around. On LinkedIn, I'm Nikki Chapple. Also got a website, and believe it or not, it's called NikkiChapple.com. So you can find me on there. So I'm speaking at lots of different events. I've got an event next Friday. So Next Friday, where am I at? I've forgotten where I am. It's the Minnesota Microsoft 365 user group. So let me just check what I'm actually doing. I'm doing a kind of a deep dive demo on using Power Automate to manage your kind of Microsoft 365 evergreen change. So so that's next Friday if you want to kind of jump on there. And then that kind of, I suppose, leads me to kind of, I suppose, the end and kind of my view on Microsoft 365, that, Microsoft 365 governance and compliance and productivity, it's not just a project. It is a lifestyle. It's a life cycle. It's forever changing. You're never going to get to the end. So when people say, when do we get to the end? It's not something you just switch on. So learning about and keeping up to date with Microsoft 365 and the changes and how you can use all of the wonderful technology you've got. There's so much in Microsoft 365. It's a lifetime's work, I think, to understand it all.
Definitely. Amazing. Thank you so much, Nikki. And we'll make sure and share the links to your Twitter and LinkedIn in the notes underneath this video. So if you're watching at home, go click on those. And the session that you're doing next week, I think, is well timed with what we've talked about today as well, in terms of using, automating processes for governance and compliance. So check that out and follow us on Cloud Conversations on YouTube. We're on Spotify, Anchor, and our Twitter is at CloudCons365. So please like and share and subscribe if you haven't already. It all helps. And that is it. Thank you so much for joining us, Nikki. It was an absolute pleasure. And I hope you guys have an amazing weekend, and we'll chat to you soon. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you ever so much for having me.
Bye.